talked about missing pieces. So I just wondered, how are you doing with your missing pieces? Have you found some more? And are there still some missing? If not, there should be, because remember, it's not complete till we get called home. So today we're going to have a little bit of fun. We're going to take a walk down a sentimental journey. The early service people, it's an interactive sermon, so you have to respond, okay? The early service people on this side were pretty good. This side was not so good at responding. There are more people on this side than this side this time, so we're going to see what happens. So I'm going to take you back to when you were a real small child. And in your memory, if I say to you, I remember my first. What was that? Dance school. Day at school. Oh, first day at school. Okay. Your first bike. Your first Sunday school teacher. Good. In the back. Ah. Remember that. Your grandfather preaching. How old were you? 3. That's very good. I don't remember when I was 3. That was too long ago. Anybody else? Any special toys? Ice skates. Dolls. Come on, Tim, tell us about Flopsy, his stuffed rabbit.
Watching my grandfather feed pancakes to Jim.
Oh.
Jim was in his high chair.
Could very well be.
No treatment at that time. How old is Jim?
83. And he still likes pancakes. Loves pancakes. Oh, yeah. You can't. So long as it's got syrup on it, it's good. Maple syrup, yes. Western New York maple syrup. Real stuff. Not Aunt Jemima or anybody else like that. Yeah, real stuff. Okay, you're getting a little older. What do you remember from your early youth? Playing softball.
Again, Jim's convertible. And I don't know if she was his first girlfriend.
We'll talk about that later. Come on. Moving into a new school system. A little bit traumatic. You're leaving your friends. Yeah. A trip. Okay. 8th grade trip to Gettysburg. Yes, that must have been impressive. Gettysburg by itself is. Have you been there recently?
Not for a few years.
They have redone back to the way it would have been during the Civil War. They've cut down a lot of trees and things and redone a lot of stuff. So it's even more. You drive through there and it's just kind of, gosh, think of what happened there. Okay. So, did you all have your morning coffee? I see some heads shaking no. That's why the response is a little on the slow side this morning. Okay. How many of you were involved a little bit later, freshman year, maybe 7th grade, in a band or a music program? What instrument?
Clarinet.
Clarinet? Trumpet and French horn. Ah, you're speaking my language now. Okay. Any other instruments? French horn. The drums. Tim, you need to talk with her. Violin. Ah. Okay, so for those of you who played an instrument back then, you're going to get a band together, aren't you? Well, he did. He took notes at the early service, and he's adding to that now in his second service. But for those of you who played an instrument, the first time you picked up that instrument, were you tremendous? Squeaky? No, there isn't anything like a squeaky clarinet. It drives your ear nuts. Do you know, you know, the hardest instrument in the band to play is the trombone. You know why? It's a slide. There are no valves. There are no keys to push. You have to know the right position. And they're not marked on the slide because that would ruin everything. So anyway, I played trombone. I played in the high school band, and the college dance band, and Casadega area band until I didn't play anymore. I still have it. I still have my dad's trombone, and I have my trombone, and they're in a case collecting dust. And I go, wonder what am I going to do with these things? Anyway, I was not very good when I first started out. How did we get better? Practice, practice, practice. Tim's story this morning was that his parents, he played drums, and they sent him to the attic because noise goes up. Sports. Any people play sports? Yes. What did you play? Softball. Softball? Basketball, softball.
Football, baseball, basketball, wrestling. What didn't you play?
A number of them. Baseball and soccer. Anybody else?
Football, volleyball, track.
Cheerleading and track. Okay, the first time you played a sport. Same idea. How good were you?
Last time I played a sport.
How did you get better? How did you get better? Practice, practice. And who pushed you?
My dad.
Your dad. Not the coach?
Ultimate football coach.
Ultimate. As I told the group this morning, I was the tallest in my class, 6'2". You would think that would get me on the first string of the basketball team, wouldn't you? But I was also clumsy because I had growth spurts. And there were other guys that were much better than I. They could hit the basket. I may be able to out-jump them, but they could hit the basket. Anyway, you had to practice constantly to improve yourself, to get better. Those of you that remember your stuffed animals and creatures, trains from your early childhood, how many of you still have some of those things? Just three or four of you. Okay. And you have taken care of those over the years. You took good care of them because they were precious to you to begin with. Yeah. Let me see. How many years before you perfected the ivory? Haven't perfected it. I was thinking you were going to tell me that. Yes, she's moving on toward perfection. How many of you remember your first television set? Oh. It was a big flat screen, wasn't it? No, it looked like about 12 inches square in a big cabinet, and behind the big cabinet were all kinds of big tubes that had to heat up before they worked. Yeah, if they worked. Okay, this is a test. Sunday night with the family, what were you watching? Lassie? Bonanza. We didn't have that one earlier. You said Disney. Disney. Whose line is it? Way back then? Ed Sullivan Show? Well, there, Lawrence Welk, Walter Cronkite, we're getting them now. And when your parents wanted you to change the channel, they handed you the remote. They say, get up and go over there and turn the knob. And how many channels? All 200? 3. 2 and a half. One channel. Wow. And look at today. But we treasure those memories of family times, especially Sunday evening, around the television and those particular shows. How many of you remember your first date? Oh, I expected more hands than that. Jeff was here this morning, and after church, I said to Jeff, I got to tell you, my first date was with your mother. I was in 8th grade, and she was in 7th grade. And we were in the same school, obviously. And she played French horn, and I played trombone. She sat in front of me. So there was always the jab. But I remembered our first date. My first date was his mom. So he says, wow. I said, yeah, a long time ago. 59 years ago I graduated. So anyway, how many of you remember not your first date, but your first love? You married her. You married him. And you're married. Okay. You marry your first love? Some of us didn't. We remember our first love, but we didn't marry. Now, here's my fun one. The first car. What was your first car?
1969 Dodge Dart Swinger. Bought in 1973 when I graduated from college.
Wow.
1969 Ford Fairlane.
Ford Fairlane, 69. She probably had to have a booster seat. They didn't have electric seats that raised you up back then, did they? Booster pedals. 54 Plymouth. Oh. 68 Ford Mustang convertible, and she told me she wished she still had it. What was that, Walter? Pontiac Astra. How careful were you of taking care of that car? How often did you wash it and wax it and keep it clean? And because you were proud of it. And Tim's answer to me this morning was, you did that because you wanted the girls to like it. That was his reason for taking care of the car. Connie's writing that down. My first car was a V1 Rolls Canardly. Ever hear of it? Rolls down one hill, can hardly get up the next one. You didn't own one of those? I was sure somebody else had one other than me. Anyway, no, my first car actually was a 1954 Ford Fairlane, color blue, with a whip antenna and a town and country radio. Pushed a button and the dial would just move automatically. And I took care of that because it was my college car. And I took care of that. But we did. We took care of those things because we wanted them to be good. Those kinds of feelings that I'm talking about, the memories that have come back to you this morning, are important to us because, well, they make us feel good. We're going, oh yeah, those were the good old days. Yeah, maybe they were. Or the good old days haven't happened yet either. You don't know, but those are important to us. Now, let me take you another place. And you do not have to answer this part unless you really feel like you want to. I want you to think about your first experience of God's love. Your first experience of God's love. Yeah. Palm Sunday, 1984. Yep.
April Fool's Night when I met him, because God brought him in my life.
I was trying to figure out how we were going to put that together on April Fools with God's love and meeting your husband. Oh, thank you. Now, you're thinking about that. Think about the time you made your first commitment to Jesus Christ. It might have been at a summer camp or at some kind of a rally that we don't seem to have anymore. It may have been in a church experience, may have been youth group. But just think about that for a moment. I'll share my story, as I did this morning, about my call to ministry. Some people get called, they get zapped by God. Other people's calls are very gradual over lots of time. I fit into that category. Grew up in Cattaraugus. We sat in the very last row because Doug couldn't sit still, according to my mother. And I remember, my grandparents were up here on this side, and my aunt and uncle and the 6 kids were on that side, and everybody I knew. But I was about 5 years old, and the benediction would happen, and I would run out, and I would shake hands. I had to look up, of course. I would shake hands with the minister, and his name was Henry Massman. And I would look at him, and I would shake his hand, and I would say to him, "Someday I'm going to be a minister just like you." My parents told me I did that. He told me I did that. And I remember, parts of me remember doing that as a young kid. So, that was my path, and that's what I followed all the way through high school, college, and seminary. And my first appointment to Sheridan, New York, the oldest Methodist society in Chautauqua County. It was 1971, and there was a retired minister there serving the church because the previous minister left in November, so the retired minister was serving. And this was my first church. That retired minister was Reverend Henry Massman, the man I used to go shake hands with when I was 5 years old. And now I was his pastor. And when he died, the family asked me to do his funeral. So my journey has been one of gradual, but it was really affirmed when I was there with him. But what do you do to nurture your faith from the time that you committed yourself to Jesus Christ and ask Him to be your Lord and Savior? It's not something you say, "Oh yeah, I'm saved. I did it on December 1st, 1946. And that was it. Haven't done a thing since then." What do you do? Why are you here? To grow. To nurture your faith. To cherish whatever happened then. To take care of, like the dolls, the cars, and so forth. To practice like we did in sports and in music. To practice growing your faith. That's why you're here. That's why you went to Sunday school. That's why somebody introduced you to God and God's love. It's important for us, and it's necessary for us to do this kind of thing, to keep the ministry and the mission that we are called to do alive, and it's so important. And if we don't treat our faith journey in the same manner that we did our cars, our instruments, our toys, you know what's going to happen? It's going to get stagnant. And you know what happens to stagnant ponds? They go away to nothing. You need extensive restoration if you let it get stagnant. The hymn that we sang, there's a reason for that. Seek the kingdom of God. Seek and constantly renew your relationship with Jesus. Your growth depends upon it. And the spiritual disciplines are the practices that help us grow in our faith, our hope, and our love of God and our neighbor. I will leave you with that.